can't only have a problem with it when it's against your political agenda. I cannot deal with a double standard. I cannot deal with hypocrisy. So if you have a problem with Shabak investigating Israelis, then you need to have a problem with Shabak investigating Israelis across the board. Netanyahu is elected. Supreme Courts are self-appointed. Why are we making this a thing? It's not a thing. Welcome back to the next episode of From Tech to Tanks. There is so much we need to talk about, but there's one issue, one glaring issue that trumps all the other issues, and we need to talk about that, and that is the absolute chaos happening internally in Israel. I want to try, I'm going to fail, but I want to try to be as unbiased and as objective as possible when it comes to this story. But let's try to start from the beginning here and say that Netanyahu has been prime minister for well over a decade and a half. I think consensus is that he's a brilliant man, a talented man, a great diplomat, great politician, but many believe, I would say the majority believe, that it's time, especially after 10/7, it's time for him to step down. The big question is, of course, who will replace him, but that's a topic for another time. So there have been hundreds of thousands of people in Israel who have taken to the streets for the better part of the last decade to call for Netanyahu's resignation. Why? The answer to that question is evolving all the time, right? In the beginning, they were accusing him of bribery, of cigars and other things. They were accusing him of bribing the Israeli press for positive coverage. And then COVID happened and they said he didn't handle it well. And then 10/7 happened and they said, you need to resign because of that. And they said, we have to bring the hostages back. Why are you prolonging the war? You're only prolonging the war to keep your own seat and to keep yourself prime minister. We need to bring the hostages back at all costs. And he said, not at all costs. And they went to the streets and then he signed a deal and they said, no, this isn't a good deal. But you said yesterday at all costs. Then that happened. And then it was the judicial reform, of course, where Bibi said that the Supreme Court in Israel has way too much power, much like what's going on in the United States. And like I said, it keeps evolving. That being said, I want to be very clear, very clear. The vast majority of these people are Zionists. They love their country, and they truly believe that Netanyahu is bad for the country. That's the vast majority. The problem is, and I'm going a little bit of a tangent here, the problem is that the minority, the violent ones, the ones that are inciting to violence, they're a small minority, but they make a lot of noise, and the majority is silent. I posted a video of a man. This is even hard to say out loud. It was I watched it, I couldn't believe what I was watching. Like, I wanted to believe it was AI, but it wasn't. A man who was part of the anti-Bibi protests declaring on a loudspeaker proudly that if only there was one heroic German in 1939 who would have taken out Hitler, he would have saved the world from World War II. And he said, and there's still in Israel today not one hero, not one, he said hero, not one hero who will save the country from Netanyahu. In other words, the guy's literally openly calling to assassinate Netanyahu. Where's the Shabak? Where is everyone? What is happening here? Craziness. That's a different discussion of the deep state. Maybe we'll make an episode on that. But what's happening right now is as follows. Netanyahu asked all the security personnel of Israel, all the security leadership of Israel, to submit reports about what happened on 10/7. Many of them submitted reports and then resigned, rightfully so. The head of the Shabak, who is, one might say, the top dog when it comes to Israel's security, right? Because Mossad is outside of Israel, Shabak is in Israel. This guy, Ronen Bar, is the head of the Shabak. He's in charge of Israel's security. He would be the first person you'd expect to resign. And so he went on record multiple times saying he will resign. Great, so what's the problem? Well, Netanyahu told him he wants the report on his desk by a certain date. That date came and passed, and he asked for an extension. Netanyahu granted him that extension. The second day came, and he again said it's not ready. That night, Netanyahu was served papers that there's an investigation being opened against him, which people call QatarGate, that implies or that alleges that Netanyahu's team was given money by Qatar, which is maybe the world's biggest supporter of terror, widely regarded as an enemy state to Israel. And QatarGate is that some of his consultants received a payout from Qatar to give Qatar favorable news coverage in Israel. That's super high level, oversimplifying in a major way. But what's going on right now? What's going on is as follows. Ronen Bar submitted a report, basically, to Netanyahu, accusing Netanyahu of treason, for lack of a better term, accusing him of looking out for his own best political interests and not looking out for the country. Of course, Netanyahu then responded with his report, claiming that all of Ronen Bar's claims are false. And once again, this country is really split. I don't want to say we're split down the middle. We're not split down the middle. The vast majority are not the people supporting, the anti-Bibi crowd. That's not the majority. There are a lot of them, and they're very loud and they're very powerful because it's the tech world, and that's the vast majority of Israel's GDP. So they're not to be ignored. But just from a numbers perspective, people like to think it's half of Israel. It's not half of Israel, not even close. But it really doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is there's hundreds of thousands of people out there right now who, after Ronen Bar submitted this report, say if Netanyahu doesn't step down now, then they're normal. Oh, there's going to be a civil war. It's the end of the democracy. It's the same kind of tactics they always say. And again, I'm trying really hard to stay unbiased here, but it is a little bit silly that whole it's the end of the democracy has been said 50,000 times, and here we are still in a democracy. But in any case, some of the things that Ronen Bar accused Netanyahu of, again, I'm trying really hard to stay unbiased here. I just can't wrap my head around them. So one of the things that he said is that Netanyahu, presumably, told Ronen Bar to go investigate some of the protesters. Some of the protesters protesting against Bibi. Netanyahu said to Ronen Bar, as the head of the Shabak, go investigate them. And in this report, Ronen Bar said, how would you do that? How would you take the Shabak and turn it into a political thing to investigate Israelis? Really? Really? 2005, the disengagement. Do you know what Shabak did to the people that were evacuated from their communities in Gaza? They had departments following and tracking these people for a long time. Many of them were sent literally to jail, to prison without a trial, and kept there for an extended period of time because of the Shabak. I'm going to tell you guys something. Not something I speak about very often, but true story. My late brother, Ari Fuld, who I'm sure you've heard of, was murdered in a terrorist attack 6.5 years ago, but he was pretty outspoken, pretty right-wing. And in the era of Rabin, when Rabin was assassinated, before Rabin was assassinated, there was a lot of incitement. The right was comparing him to Hitler and to Arafat and all these things, and the left was like, what are you doing? You're inciting to murder. And then he was murdered, and they blamed the right. There was a Shabak agent named Avishai Raviv, whose sole mission was to entrap Israeli rightists and get them to do things that are illegal and then arrest them. How do I know this? Because he did it to my brother. Avishai Raviv ate at my parents' Shabbos table. He was Ari's friend at the time. Ari was his friend. He thought they were friends. And over, he tried to get Ari to do illegal things. Of course, Ari never did them. And only later did we find out that he was a Shabak agent trying to trap and trying to, get these people to do things that are illegal. So Ronen Bar is complaining that Netanyahu is using the Shabak to investigate Israelis? Really? Because there was a report that Shabak was investigating in Israeli society because of Ben Gvir. They were investigating Israelis because of what Ronen Bar called Kahanism, which is Rabbi Kahana. The late Rabbi Kahana is labeled a terrorist organization. Kach is his organization. He basically called for the deportation of all Palestinians, and whatever it is, he's labeled a terrorist. And Ronen Bar basically decided that the school of thought, Kahana's school of thought, is being spread in Israel, and so he launched an investigation into Israelis to see if this is something that's being spread widely within Israeli society. This was a few weeks ago. So Netanyahu telling him to investigate Israelis who are violently protesting in the streets and calling for actual murder and inciting against and violence and civil war and violent uprisings, and he's telling the head of the Shabak to go investigate them, and that's a problem? Why is that a problem? And if it's a problem, how is it not a problem in the many other times that Shabak investigated Israelis? So, as you know by now, if you follow my stuff, I have tolerance for a lot of things. I cannot deal with a double standard. I cannot deal with hypocrisy. So if you have a problem with Shabak investigating Israelis, then you need to have a problem with Shabak investigating Israelis across the board. You can't only have a problem with it when it's against your political agenda. So that's one. That's one of the things that, Bibi's being accused of. Another thing Bibi's being accused of is that apparently, after one of the cabinet meetings, after whoever was taking the protocol and writing down what was being said in the meeting left the room, Netanyahu allegedly told Ronen Bar that if we have a breakup, for lack of a better term, between the courts and the government in Israel, right? If we have this mashber chukati in Hebrew, I'm trying to think how to say it, a crisis between, the judicial branch and the legislative branch, he said to Ronen Bar, side with me, right? And so they're presenting it as if he sneakily told him, dude, Shabak reports to the government. Like, why are we making this a thing? It's not a thing. Netanyahu said, if if the Supreme Courts contradict me, and remember, Netanyahu is elected. Supreme Courts are self-appointed. So if there is a conflict between the government and the courts, and Netanyahu said to the head of Shabak, side with me, the only thing that's surprising here is that he had to say it. It's so obvious. Of course you have to side with the government. You report to the government. Shabak reports to the government. The list of things that Netanyahu is being accused of, and I can't even say accused because none of these things are admissions of guilt. Even if he did these things, none of them are like, and just for 1 second, when you talk about the other accusations, like Netanyahu bribed Israeli media, Israeli journalists to give him positive coverage. I mean, have you ever seen positive coverage of Bibi in Israeli press? Like, it's a joke, right? And I keep alluding to it, I keep mentioning it, but this deep state thing, right? It's kind of labeled as like it's a conspiracy theory, right? Oh, come on, there's no deep state. There is a deep state. Forget for 1 second the courts, forget it all, okay? Netanyahu addressed the nation, right? He announced that he has an announcement to make. He got on live television and he announced, and he addressed the nation. Every single channel in Israel, besides one, Channel 14, which is the only not left-wing channel, every single one of the channels cut Netanyahu off in the middle. The prime minister of the country is speaking to the country, and Israeli media thought it was a good idea to cut him off in the middle. What is that? That's called the media being anti-Bibi. That's called the media being left. That's called deep state. That's called the media being controlled by the left. And that is what people, you know what, don't call it deep state, call it whatever you want. The fact of the matter is, the left does not run this country anymore. The right, it's a right-wing government, and yet the left has so much influence. So you don't want to call it deep state, call it whatever you want. The fact of the matter is the left has too much power. And that is why, I guess we're throwing, my not being biased out the window. What can I do? That's why they freaked out about the judicial reform, because they lost the government, they're losing the media. Right now we have Channel 14, which is very popular, right? And their last stronghold were the courts, right? And so when Bibi said, we're going to take power away from the courts so that they don't have absolute power. To be clear, I want to be very clear, Netanyahu never suggested that the courts don't have any power. He just simply said, they're the checks to the government, but they need balances. They can't have absolute power. And the reality in Israel has been that if the courts decide something, they can completely overrule and overrun and veto the government because they decided what the government, legislated is unreasonable. That's literally what they have to say. It's unreasonable, which is clearly a subjective term. So the courts had absolute power, and Bibi wanted to, restrain them and wanted to give them some balances. And then the left freaked out. I don't want to call it left because I don't know what left is anymore. But the anti-Bibi crowd freaked out. Why? Because that was their last source of influence in this country, the courts. So the reality is right now, Netanyahu and Ronen Bar are going at each other like little kids, and he's accusing him, he's denying, he's accusing him, he's denying. Did he call me on 10/7, right? Netanyahu says Ronen Bar knew about 10/7 hours before the launch, and he didn't wake Netanyahu up to let him know because he wanted to sabotage Netanyahu's career, basically, and which is, if that's true, that's like life in prison. That's like full-blown treason. Like 1,200 people died because you didn't pick up the phone. Now I don't want to believe that. I really don't want to believe that. But I also don't want to believe that Ronen Bar is saying it's true that he did call Netanyahu and Netanyahu didn't do anything about it. So, again, they're throwing accusations at each other right now. The people who suffer the most is this country, because at the end of the day, we have documented proof, evidence from Gaza that Hamas launched 10/7 because of the internal divide and the division and the hatred within Israel. They know, our enemies know better than us, that when we're divided and we're not unified, we are weak. And right now, there is just a split down the middle. We have hundreds of thousands of people calling for Netanyahu to resign immediately. And we have the rest of the country saying that Ronen Bar is a corrupt, individual who took the Shabak, which is supposed to be apolitical and have no political inclinations, and made it into a political movement. And Israel split. And right now we're fighting an existential war. And the fact that Shabak and the government can't work together is going to have pretty practical and disastrous implications for the war. There's no question about it. We've already seen, if I'm not mistaken, it was a Bedouin soldier who was killed and several female combat soldiers were injured severely. I'm not saying that that's related to this, but we need to get our stuff together, if you know what I mean, because this can't continue. And so where we're at right now is, I think Ronen Bar has agreed that he is resigning. The courts before that told Netanyahu that not only can he not fire him, but he can't even interview candidates for the next head of the Shabak. Again, who asked them, right? appointed you. Why are you like? So that's the argument. And right now, Ronen Bar is going to step down. What's going to happen with Bibi is obviously yet to be seen. But if you'd ask me, this is my opinion, and I know that the world of social media and media in general does not allow and does not have any tolerance for nuance, for the gray. Everything's black and white, but it's actually not black and white. And I think that Netanyahu has to step down, but not now. He has to step down because he was the prime minister on 10/7. He should have accountability for what happened, period. Is he guilty? Of course not, in my opinion. But he was the leader of the country. He needs to step down, but not now, not in the middle of a war. We're fighting an existential war. We don't need more political turmoil right now. We need stability and we need to win this war. So I agree. Netanyahu should step down. He's been in office too long. He should train someone else, which is the next question of if he does step down, who replaces him? I mean, Bennett has pretty much announced that he's joining politics. He had a heart attack, by the way. Wish him a speedy recovery. So the big question is, okay, if Netanyahu steps down, or when Netanyahu steps down, who's going to replace him? Because Lapid is an absolute clown. I mean, I'm being nice. The guy didn't finish high school, lied about finishing high school, didn't do army, lied about doing army. Like, he contradicts himself when he opens his mouth. Like, the guy lies more than, it's crazy. So he can't be prime minister. I don't think anyone thinks he could be prime minister. He also doesn't have a mandate. He has no one's voting for Lapid anymore. You have Gantz, who's, I've met him. He's a respectable guy. He's an impressive guy. And as a human being, I don't know his opinions on anything. I literally do not know what Gantz thinks about any issue. So he can't be prime minister because no one knows what he thinks. So, Bennett might be, but again, he's not in right now. And he also lost a lot of the loyalty of his followers because in the last government, as you probably know, he announced, he's a friend. Bennett's a good friend. And I don't know. I'll never understand why he did this. He held up a contract on TV. And he said, here's the contract. I will never sit with Lapid or the Arab parties who are primarily anti-Zionist. I will never sit with Lapid and the Arabs in a government, no matter what. I will never allow Lapid to be the prime minister of this country. 2 weeks later, he becomes prime minister, and him and Lapid switch off as prime minister, and he makes a unity government with the Arabs. Now, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I mean this. I asked him. I said, Naftali, what were you thinking? I voted for you. Why would you backstab me like that? I would never have voted for you if I thought you were going to create a government with anti-Zionist Arabs. And he said something to me which I respect and I believe, I don't agree with, but I actually think that what he did, while I disagree with it, he thought he was doing what's best for the country. And so what he said to me, he said, you don't think I knew I was committing political suicide when I did that? You don't think I realized that when I contradict myself so obviously that I'm going to lose support? Of course I knew. So I said, then why'd you do it? I did it, he said, because he thought at that moment Israel needed a unity government. Now again, I disagree. I think there's no circumstances in which we should sit in a government with the anti-Israel Arabs within the parliament, which is, by the way, asterisk, the fact that there are anti-Zionist Arab Muslims in Israel's parliament and we're still called an apartheid is just laughable. But I said to him, I would never, and he said, yeah, I understand that, but I thought Israel needed a unity government. So, he's a very talented guy. He's a brilliant guy. I don't know if you know, he was a tech entrepreneur before he went into politics. Very successful guy, very smart guy, very articulate. He could probably fill Bibi's shoes. The only problem is he backstabbed many of his voters. I don't know that he'll get the support he needs to become prime minister ever again. There are all kinds of different discussions. Nir Barkat, who was the mayor of Jerusalem, who, again, I met, I respect him. I agree with a lot of his opinions. He's good. I think he can potentially, replace Bibi. There are some options. There's no one on the caliber of Benjamin Netanyahu. There isn't, and I don't know there ever will be, and I don't even mean in Israel. I think he's a once-in-a-generation politician. Forget his opinions. I'm not talking about his ability to be articulate, his ability to influence diplomats around the world, his ability to facilitate things and to have connections and build relationships. There's no one like Benjamin Netanyahu, and I say that as someone that didn't vote for him, by the way. So I don't know that there's someone that can replace him on that level, but when this war ends and we achieve complete victory, not before, I think Netanyahu has to, throw his hat in and say, I did the best I can, and now it's time for someone else, young blood, to take my seat. But just to kind of summarize, right now we have this internal fighting. I don't want to say civil war, God forbid, but you read some of the tweets and some of the posts of people like Ehud Barak, who's the most decorated soldier in Israel's history, and a lot can be said in his defense. It's hard for me not to say what I'm about to say. He's lost it, full-blown lost it. His hatred of Bibi has thrown him over the edge, and he said things that I just can't believe he said. In fact, he said such horrible things that there are quite a few conspiracy theories about his role in October 7th. I'm not going to go there, but he said some pretty horrible things, as has Ehud Olmert, another former prime minister. So the things that are being said about Netanyahu are horrible, inciting to violence and murder. It's terrible. There's, of course, the other side, which thinks that Netanyahu is God's gift to the world and he has to stay under in every circumstance, no matter what. The truth is somewhere in the middle, right? I think he has to stay in power right now. He has to win this war. And I don't think anyone in this country can run this war the way Netanyahu can run this war. But I think once the war is over and we achieve complete victory, it's time to pass it on to the next generation. So those are my thoughts. I hope somehow, miraculously, this internal fighting ends very soon, because we can't afford this division, because we can't afford to be weak. But unfortunately, it's not headed in a good direction. And all I can say is I can do is I speak to my friends. I just had a call with a guy, a Microsoft executive an hour ago, who's very, very anti-Bibi. And we've fought and we've debated online many, many times. We had a discussion about business, but at the end of the call, we're like, let's discuss. And so we said we're going to meet face to face to talk about it. And so all I can do is try to create unity by speaking to the other side, but I'm not a politician. I'm not running this country. The leaders of this country need to sit down and, work things out, because it's, again, the victim of all of this, and the big loser here is the population, the people of Israel. And so all I can say is I hope it ends soon. Thank you. Let's take some questions. Can anyone replace Bibi? That's the question. Well, of course, the answer is yes, right? I mean, he's not, God, right? There are people who, they need to be trained. They need to, learn the game. But if you'd ask me right now, if I can name a single individual who can run this war the way Bibi's run this war, who can stand up to Biden when he said not to go into Rafah, stand up to Biden when he said not to go into Lebanon, pull off the beeper operation, the walkie-talkie operation, take out Nasrallah, all of the things that Israel did under Netanyahu. If you're asking if there's another person who can run this war the way Netanyahu ran this war, I can't think of a single person. I think the closest is probably Bennett, but as I said, Bennett really shot himself in the foot last time around, so I don't know that he can possibly get as much support as he needs to become prime minister. So as of now, there are many people in the Likud and in the Knesset and in the government, talented people. If you're asking me if there's anybody that I can see right now that can just move into Bibi's shoes and take over and run this country as well as Bibi did, I can't think of a single name. So a little bit of change of subject. A question was about the diplomatic talks between the United States and Iran. As you know, Bibi has basically set his life's mission to destroy Iran's nuclear program. And he's been very clear about that for a decade. Now that we have Trump in the White House, a friend, you would think that we would just take the gloves off and do what we need to do. But Trump, I would say surprisingly, surprised me, announced that he's going to be having direct talks with Iran to discuss their nuclear ambitions. And I believe they've had 2 rounds of talks so far. The supreme leader of Iran made it very clear that they're not going to stop enriching uranium. That's their red line. So I don't know exactly what they're talking about, but the question is the United States stopping or, holding back Israel from doing what it needs to do? Or is the United States saying to Israel, you could do what you need to do, but you don't have us, we're not going to join the military operation? Or third option is Trump speaking to Iran as kind of the last resort, knowing, all right, check, we checked all the boxes, we did what we had to do, now let's attack together? Time will tell, but I do not want to believe that Trump is naive enough to think that he can achieve anything with the evil regime of Iran and their nuclear program, because it's kind of their only negotiating card. So they're not giving up on that. So I don't know exactly what's going on in these talks. Time will tell, but I want to believe that Trump is just doing what he has to do to make a check and say, we did it. And then he's going to hopefully give Israel the green light. And Israel, with the help and support of America, will attack Iran. Don't forget, Iran has no aerial defense systems. Israel took them out. Will attack Iran, will destroy, obliterate their nuclear facilities and bring them, send them back to the Stone Ages from a nuclear perspective. But no one knows. Things happen from day to day. Everything changes. So we're waiting to hear what happens between Trump and Iran, between America and Iran in those diplomatic talks. We'll probably know within a span of about a few days to a week. We'll see.